The reading this morning is called The Prayer of Reconciliation by Reverend Ann Barker. We gather with a hunger for reconciliation. What is done cannot be undone. What is done next must now be done with care. We gather because we are hopeful, because we have visions and dreams of a brighter future. But there may be more than vision in this room. There are the wounds we must heal together. Grief and anger for all that has been lost, guilt or fear in the reliving, pain that has gone without sufficient comfort, mistrust that was earned, that continues burning still. Every injury we may have named and yet still carry, and those we haven't, can't, or dare not speak aloud. Those we are not ready to make public. Those still not recognized, accepted, understood. These are the wounds that seek replacement, not cancellation or denial. Wounds we will tend cautiously, applying the salve of understanding, forming scars that mark our history without disfiguring the future that we might share. This is not a time of quick solutions, fancy talking. This is a slow precision. This is a prayer for peace. We are new to this endeavor, new at listening, new at hearing, new at taking enough time to honestly receive one another's stories. What is done cannot be undone. What is done next must now be done with care. We gather because we are hopeful, because we have visions and dreams of a brighter future. May the strength of this time together help us to walk forward. May the wisdom of this experience help us to know our path. May we have the courage to return as often as necessary until our way is clear. May we have the perseverance together to see it through. May we cause it to be so. Now please rise if you choose and join in singing hymn number 123, Spirit of Life.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life a shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me. Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free.
Our special guest speaker this morning is Linda Cypret-Kilbourne. Linda is a Native elder with a lifetime of experience as an activist and organizer fighting for equity and justice for the Native community. So now I will hand over to Linda.
Good day, good morning. I was asked to come this morning and speak on several different topics, and I will try to do my best. People normally always want to know what my titles are, and the most important title I carry is being a great-grandmother. We have a large extended family, 25 children, 60 grandchildren, and 31 great-grandchildren. So that's my priority. I do carry other titles, but I always feel uncomfortable talking about them because that's not our way. Usually other people, it's their place to let that be known. So I'm just gonna vaguely mention a few this morning. I am a co-founder of the Michigan Coalition Against Racism in Sports and Media, a Native Rights Michigan. I'm an elder for the Native Justice Coalition. I've also have a fellowship with the Arcus Center at Kalamazoo, among other things. So with that said, one of the topics that was asked was, why is it important to have Native Americans included in decision-making? One of the reasons I believe is because with our teachings, we are taught that we always look at the next 7 generations coming up from behind us. So every decision that we make will affect those next 7 generations coming, just as our ancestors did for us, those 7 generations before us. And with all the issues that are out there right now, Indian country is pretty bombarded with a lot of issues. At this point, I'm going to introduce myself in my language in which I was taught by my elders. Abaju aninishna ajawana nimkikwe dishes nakas shikandodum works the Kalamazoo River and Donjaba. Anishinaabe and Dao, Osage, Cherokee, French, and German. What I said was, my name is Southern Thunder Woman. I'm Turtle Clan, and I reside in the Albion Marshall area, also known as Linda. I think it's good to see land acknowledgements being done. They're happening more. I hear more people using land acknowledgements nowadays, and the reason I think this is good is because we're actually acknowledging the fact of whose land we stand on. When history was written, it wasn't written truthfully. It was written in the eyes of the beholders at the time. So a lot of our history isn't told, Native American history especially. There was a time quite a few years back where I worked with Sue Lepper and the state of Michigan trying to change some of the history books. And that's a challenge because Texas has a lot of control over that. But we did manage to get the word Potawatomi put in there. And even though most people use Boatomi, and there's a confusion on that too, because there's actually 3 tribes federally recognized here in Michigan as a group. There's 12 bands and 1 state recognized. So when you hear the word Ojibwe or Chippewa, it's the same group of people. The same with Ottawa and Odawas and Potawatomi and Boatomi. So a lot of times people get confused and think there's 6. But there's really 3, and that's why it's called the Three Fires Confederacy. So land acknowledgements are good because a lot of people don't have a clue who was here prior and actually still are here. Kalamazoo has a large Native population in this area, and in fact, the whole state of Michigan. And there's other natives too from other places that live here in Michigan. We're born and raised here in Michigan. There's Oneidas and Cherokees and different people. So it's good too for some of them because they may not know either. So when we acknowledge whose land we stand on, it's an educational process and learning for people. Another topic I wanted to touch base was on religion, being that we're here today. A lot of people don't realize that for Native Americans, we weren't freely allowed to practice our religion until 1978, when Jimmy Carter introduced the Religious Act. You could be physically put in jail before that and serve time. You could be prosecuted for carrying eagle feathers, different things. Even today, you have to have special permission. You have to have a letter to prove your eagle feathers are legit and different things like that. If you have Native American heritage and you're not a tribal card carrier that's federally recognized, by law, you're not allowed to have those feathers. So there's still complications and fights that we fight just to practice our own religion. Smudging, which I did this morning, we believe that brings in the good spirits and takes away all the negativity and stuff. Even to this day, you know, there's rules that say no fire in the building. So it prohibit us at times to do our smudging, which I'm thankful for this morning. It wasn't an issue. But there's been times when I've had to argue and have discussions and whatnot about the right I have to smudge because it's part of our spirituality, our religion. So we're still struggling in that area about what we're allowed to do according to the laws in this country, where a lot of people are free to go to church on Sunday or Wednesday or Saturday, you know, or what, and they don't realize that Native Americans still have to be fearful in some ways. I can remember going to ceremonies not very long ago in the 90s where we had black helicopters that flew over the top of us and people ran off to the bush to hide. You know, that was still happening then. Even my grandmother told me a story about how they would have to hide their rattles, because that's what we use, shakers, when we do some of our songs and stuff. And they would use salt and pepper shakers so that when they got stopped, they wouldn't realize that's what it was. And they would put little pebbles in there and they would serve the same purpose. But they wouldn't be looked at if somebody was looking for some type of religious item or whatever. In that sense, they wouldn't realize that's what they were using them for. So there's been a lot of things just in that area alone. Another big thing nowadays is the MMIWG+2, which is murdered and missing Indigenous women, girls. and two-spirited people. I like to say our relatives, missing and murdered relatives. And it's a huge, huge issue in this country. One of the reasons is because people are not made accountable for their actions that they do. It's been undocumented for years, especially out in the Dakotas, Wyoming, and that area out there, Wind River, where people will come onto the reservations and accost these women, and they're never held accountable for. The laws won't do anything. When girls are reported missing, the police won't do anything. You know, they're like, oh, well, they might have ran away or something. So that like 24-hour deal they have nowadays for missing people don't always apply to our people. The discrimination is really high out in that area. So there's a big movement right now to bring awareness to that. The Native Justice Coalition has been putting up billboards, particular up north around Manistee and Sault Ste. Marie area, to bring awareness to people about this issue. And it actually ties into the trafficking of people. And I know trafficking even includes young children and young boys and stuff. So it's a huge problem in this country. And I'm sure you've probably read about a lot of it in the papers and stuff about trafficking, where they've busted certain rings in different areas and whatnot. But they don't seem to apply a lot of those rules with the Native community for some reason. We're not that important, I guess, but we're working very hard to bring that awareness out into society to make people more aware of what's going on in that area. Another issue that is being dealt with right now is the boarding schools. I don't know how many of you know about boarding schools, but children were taken away from their parents, were forced to go to boarding schools. And in these boarding schools, they weren't treated very well at all. They were abused. They'd have their hair cut, which for us was really a drastic thing for a child, because we don't cut our hair unless there's like immediate death in the family. So these children were very confused about what was going on. They thought their parents had died, you know. They were sexually assaulted. They were forced into Christianity. There was a lot of things that happened, and children were killed and buried on these grounds where the boarding schools were, and of course never accounted for. And what's taking place now is they have new machinery where they can actually look into the ground, and find different things. So they're finding all these children that weren't accounted for. There's no record of them dying or being there or whatever, and they're coming up now. And it's not like 1,000 kids. We're talking thousands of kids. It's huge. Canada, in particular, they've got massive amounts of children that are being found, and they're just now getting started here in the United States. We had some representatives that were just up north last month, basically listening to testimonies of survivors of boarding schools. The last boarding school, I think it was 85 when it closed in this country. I have friends that went to boarding schools. Mount Pleasant had a boarding school, different ones up north. So they were still in operation not very long ago. So these boarding schools, it affected people. It created trauma, and trauma that's been handed down generation after generation. And that's one of the big issues that we deal with in the Native community. When you're a child and you're put into one of those institutions, and you're abused and whatnot. And then at 18, you're just kind of like kicked out of the door. They didn't teach how to be a mother or, how to be a dad or anything like that. Emotion and love wasn't shown, or, they were only taught like manual skills, like ironing for the girls and cooking and washing dishes, and the boys were, into wood shop and that kind of stuff. So it was like menial type jobs. So when the kids got 18 and they just kind of kicked them to the curb, they didn't really have the skills to be out in the world, So it created issues when they had their own children, because they didn't know how to relate. They didn't know how to show that affection and love. So that's still being dealt with. And that's one of the reasons when we deal with the mascot issue, people says, well, why now? Why 70 years later? Well, that's one of the reasons, because we couldn't speak up. No one asked us what we thought or what we cared about. And a lot of times people couldn't speak up because if you did, your food rations were taken away from you. They had to go to church on Sunday to get their food rations. And a lot of times when they were shoved on the reservations and stuff back then, if somebody spoke out, everybody was punished for it. So even the elders, when I would talk to them, like in the 80s, they'd say, oh, don't say anything, it'll cause trouble for everybody, and it was still that mentality, that these things would happen. And the other thing about the mascots I want to touch base on is that people don't realize these severed heads of the native figures on logos and stuff for the schools. Those are representatives of our spiritual ways. They are our spiritual leaders. They were people of high places and dignity. The headdresses that they wear are not war bonnets, as the Hollywood movies made everything. They're spiritual bonnets, headdresses that was worn by spiritual people or leaders, and they had eagle feathers, and eagle feathers are the highest honor that you can receive as a Native person, and you earned those. It wasn't something that just, it wasn't like a toy or something. You actually earned those feathers. So when they use these logos, they're degrading our spiritual leaders. So you would never put, your minister or a rabbi or, a priest or anybody on a gym floor and trample back and forth across it. So this is what that is. That is our spiritual leaders. And that is one of the reasons why we fight against the use of these mascots in the school, is because a lot of the things that they do is our religion. It's like when the kids paint up their faces and stuff, that is a spiritual thing that our warriors do before they go to battle, still to this day. It's so that the spirits know who you are in case you get killed. You transform to the spirit world and they know you. So a lot of things that happen at these PEP assemblies are spiritual things that they're doing, and they don't realize it, that that's what they're doing. And that's why we say they're mocking us or degrading us. And some of the names that are used, Redskins in particular, is probably one of the worst racial slurs that could ever be used. And we have one school here in Michigan that is still using that nickname, and that's Camden Frontier. So we're hoping that maybe they'll change their mind and change here pretty soon. I guess the point on mascots is, why would anybody want to do that to a living, breathing, cultural people? We're still here today. We still exist. We've survived. And there is no other group of people who would allow that to happen to their culture. But, the Hollywood movies made us into these great, magnificent warriors, and romanticism, and all this kind of stuff, that it created that image that people think, oh yeah, this is the great thing to do. And it came basically out of the 1920s and 30s. That's kind of like when the schools started picking this stuff up, and a lot of it had to do with the Boy Scouts. But no one ever asked the Native people how they felt about it, so it's something that just continued on. And now we're speaking out against it because we don't want to see our children affected anymore. I can honestly say I've never went into anyone's town without an invite to help them. And we've come a long way since we first started working on this. The first school changed back in '68. It's been a slow process. More changes have happened in the last 2 years than it has since then. So I'm sure it's because of the awareness and stuff that's happening and coming out. So we're still working on that. One of the other things like that would be dealt with is, I'll use Calumet for an example. They're way up north. They call themselves the Copper Kings, but in their logo, they have a sacred pipe. And when I talked to them, they didn't think there was anything wrong with it. They continue to do it. But it's a religious item for us. Our pipes are what carries our prayers to the Creator. So we try to educate and bring awareness about these items, hoping that other people will come forth and help support the change. So I ask people, if you go to a school that's Indian Braves or Chiefs, go talk to your superintendent, ask for change, do research yourself. If you aren't and you play a school that is, ask your school not to announce them of whatever their nickname is. Just announce them as their name. Like, say, if you were playing Camden Frontier, you wouldn't announce them as the Redskins, you would just say Camden Frontier. And what this does is it sends a message to let them know that outside of their own community, it's not acceptable. That by carrying those items out of your own community, you're affecting other Native children in other communities, and that's not acceptable. Another issue that we have that is an issue that is for everybody is the water. There's been many water walks throughout Michigan. Grandma Josephine started the first water walk around the lakes, and that was completed. She has passed on now, but there's women that are continuing to carry that awareness out there. There's also tribes that are working with the state of Michigan to help make changes in that area, because water is life. There is nothing or anyone that can live without it. So it's an issue for all of us. And the fracking and Enbridge and all the other stuff that takes place is a serious issue. Yeah, I don't know if any of you seen anything about Standing Rock a few years back. The media wasn't really up to reporting. Most of it was out on the internet and stuff, people doing their own live streaming and stuff. But they were trying to stop Enbridge out there because of the pipeline. And the state allowed Enbridge to hire people, and they dumped water on the protectors in sub-below zero weather. They shot rubber bullets at them. They turned dogs loose on them. They put people in cages. They would strip them down and stick them in cages. This was all going on, and it was during the end of Obama's administration, and then the next one, I think it was Trump came in or whatever, but it was during that time period, and the government just ignored it. It was like it didn't matter. And the camps out there had grew so big that there was thousands of people who came. They came from all over the world, different tribes and representatives and supporters, and the veterans showed up. There was a lot of stuff going out there trying to put a stop to it. So there's a lot of things that go on in the Native world. Some of it good, some of it not so good. But we work hard to achieve goodness and make things better for everybody. I think one of the hard things about the water issues are, I don't know what people are going to do when we don't have water anymore, where you can't really physically drink that pure water. For us, we grow the rice. I should say Mother Earth grows the rice. We harvest it. And it's one of the, things that keep us alive. That's one of our foods. There's just so much that goes on with water. And I'm sure everybody knows this, that we really need to rethink about what's going to happen, what's going to happen with our children. I don't know. It's just one of those issues out there. I don't know if I'm getting close to my time. I hope this helps a little bit. If anybody has any questions later, I'd be more than glad to try to answer them for you. And I'm honored that you invited me here today to share a little bit of insight in my world. But before I close, I'd like to sing our water song for you. Nebe gizonge igo chimigwechoe nimigo gijoe nimigo nebe gizonge igo chimigwechoe nimigo gijoe nimigo nebe gizonge igo chimigwechoe nimigo gijoe nimigo nebe gizonge igo chimigwechoe nimigo gijoe nimigo. Anikana, miigwech for having me.